Dean is the host of the Dean Obeidallah Show, weekdays 6 to 9 on Sirius XM Progress, channel 127. He's a columnist with the Daily Beast, and deanofradio.com is his website. You can tweet him at Dean Obeidallah, and he does a great show in the evenings. Dean, I was reading this article about how the Daily Stormer, I've read it over at the Daily Beast, about how the Daily Stormer may have to reveal their funding sources in part because you sued them. Can you tell me about this?
Yes, and this article is not one I wrote for the Daily Beast. It's one written about me. Several months ago, I filed a lawsuit against the Daily Stormer with the help of Muslim Advocates, which is a great organization, and they were able to get Latham & Watkins, one of the biggest firms in America, to get on board to help us with this. What happened is the Daily Stormer had fabricated tweets saying I was involved in the Manchester bombing and that I had masterminded it and that I carried it out, and then I was joyful about it and hoping more would die. And they weren't able to tweet them out. What they did is they made them look exactly like real tweets and wrote an article and based on that. And in their fake tweets, they even put fake retweets and fake likes to make it look very real and urged their readers on Daily Stormer to come after me, which results in death threats, as you might imagine, because it is a neo-Nazi website. And so we filed a lawsuit against them for defamation. And now we've been trying to serve Andrew Anglin, who is the head of the Daily Stormer. He's been on the run. He's being sued by another, Ms. Gersh, who with the Southern Poverty Law Center is helping out with things that they did to her. And we can't find him, but we're trying to, through discovery now in federal court in Ohio, where this lawsuit is filed, because that's the last known address of Andrew Anglin and his corporation, to find out who funds the Daily Stormer, who's been giving them money. What's remarkable is that I think most people have heard of like Kickstarter or LaunchGood or these other crowd funding sites. There's actually one for hate groups called Hatreon, Hatreon, out there, raising money for hate groups, and that's where they go raise their money. And also he was taking direct credit cards. So we're trying to find out who funds the Daily Stormer, and we'll see if the federal court grants our motion.
Is there any precedent for that? Have other groups on the left, on the right, or having to do with sports ever been sued for defamation and had to reveal the sources of their funding as a consequence of that?
I'm not aware of it. I'm a lawyer by training, but I didn't do this kind of work as a lawyer. My litigation didn't involve big defamation lawsuits, and I'm not sure if the lawyers in this case, if it's a unique motion, an application to the court or not. I'd have to think it's probably not. It seems to be something that if you're filing a lawsuit, you want to get damages, and finding out where their funding is important. So we'll see what happens. I think you have to make a showing, though, to the court that there's a legitimate reason for you to need to find the funding here, and that's where the question is going to come up. So this is not normal. This is not a typical traditional route in a lawsuit for defamation, but at the same time, I don't think it's the first time or a novel way of doing this. It's a unique organization, Daily Stormer. They're getting their funding from others. So the goal is then, if the Daily Stormer has this corporation, Moonbase, which is the way they've incorporated is Moonbase Holdings, we'll find out who funds them. I don't think we can then pursue those individuals, but if we find out that really a shell and that Andrew Anglin has other corporations out there that's funding Moonbase, perhaps then we can amend our complaint and sue them as well. So we're trying to find out all the revenue sources. It'll be interesting, too, to see how it impacts other hate groups if the court grants our motion here, because other individuals might not want their credit card information to become public and find out that they actually gave a donation to a neo-Nazi website.
Yeah. Now, you are, in addition to being a talk show host, 6 to 9 p.m., just as a human being, you're Muslim.
Right.
Was that the basis of why they came after you? Was it because you were a talk show host? Was it because you're a Muslim? Or was it for some other reason? Why pick on Dean Obeidallah?
Well, I mean, neo-Nazis is no surprise. Hate Muslims, they hate Jews, they hate blacks, they hate minorities. So this is part and parcel of their whole approach to things, is the idea of going after someone who's visible as in the media. What really launched it was that I had written an article about a week before that terrorist attack in the UK, saying, why won't Donald Trump use the term white supremacist terrorism? And this was about 2 months before Charlottesville. There were other white supremacist terrorist attacks that had happened in America, in New York, in Portland, and there was one other at the time, and that Donald Trump was ignoring them. While at the same time, if somebody is Muslim or an undocumented immigrant would commit any crime, he would, of course, tweet about it, talk about it, and try to use it for political gain. So my point is, why is he not calling out white supremacist terrorism? Well, that outraged Andrew Anglin and the neo-Nazis, who are big supporters of Trump. In fact, in the article I just tweeted out at Dean Obeidallah, if they want to see, it's a picture of Andrew Anglin, the head of the Daily Stormer, wearing a Make America Great hat again. And they were openly cheerleading for Donald Trump. I mean, they are his white supremacist savior. So they came after me because I'm visible in the media. I had attacked them in an article, and their goal is to silence minorities. I mean, my lawsuit is not about getting damages for me. If we get any money, I'm not going to keep it. We're going to give it to charity. It's the idea that you're not going to silence any minority. We're not going to sit back and be quiet as you try to marginalize our voices, be Muslim or Jewish or LGBT community or African American or Latino, whatever minority group. They're trying to silence us. And what's scary, though, about the Daily Stormer is that Dylan Roof was a Daily Stormer reader who went and committed a horrific terrorist attack, killing 9 African Americans. The man James Jackson, who came to New York in the spring and killed an African American man trying to kill others, he was arrested, wanted to start a race war, was charged with terrorism here in New York. He was a Daily Stormer reader. So they are radicalizing people like an ISIS website, and we're just trying to hold them responsible. And if you give money to a terrorist group like ISIS, I think you should be revealed. And if you give money to an organization like the Daily Stormer, which in my view, again, is a modern-day ISIS in America, you should find out who those people are, and they should be exposed, and they should be held up to the light of day.
It seems like the next step would be to define domestic terrorism in a way that our government has been very reluctant to do. In fact, when the FBI just issued a report about right-wing domestic terrorism in the United States back in the first months of the Barack Obama administration, a report, by the way, that had been commissioned by George W. Bush, when they just issued that report on how bad the problem was in the United States, Obama had the report pulled because he got so many death threats and so much pushback and whatnot. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. Mm-hmm. And we haven't had that conversation in this country about, how do we define, how do we identify, what does it mean if we've got basically ISIS websites, only domestic ISIS, our own homegrown version of religious and racial fundamentalism. And what do we do about that? I mean, is any part of your lawsuit seeking to identify them as terrorists?
No, I mean, because this is a civil action, but I think to your bigger point, Tom, you're absolutely right. And I think there's a federal definition for domestic terrorism that I think is woefully short and inadequate at this point. I think it has to be updated. Interestingly, in Austin, the bomber, and I wrote about it, we may have talked about it, I wrote an article, how many bombs does a non-Muslim have to send out before they're called a terrorist? Well, the local sheriff there did call the guy a terrorist about a week later and meant it in a term of art, but it didn't really get picked up in our media. I think we need a new definition, and I think we also need the media, others in the media, not me and you, others to stop their hesitance in using the term terrorist if the person is white. And that's the reality that we're dealing about. If they are brown, if they are Muslim, they have no problem using that term terrorist. And I think it makes us safer. It's not about double standards, and it's not just about fairness because I'm Muslim. It's about making Americans safer, knowing that terrorists come in all different shapes and colors. Last year, the ADL quantified there were 34, I believe, extremist terror killings on U.S. soil. 18 by white supremacists, 9 by Islamic-related. So you see where it's going in the time of Trump. They're emboldened by Donald Trump being in the presidency, no different than during the time of the Civil Rights Movement when George Wallace was elected and other white supremacists were elected, and there were more bombings, not less. Their appetite was not satiated by the election of someone on their side. In fact, they were emboldened to say, someone in power has our back. And that's why Wallace gets sworn in. 9 months later, the 16th Street Baptist Church is blown up in Birmingham, Alabama, and countless other bombings went on. In Mississippi as well, they elected a white supremacist governor. Same thing, you saw more bombings. So in the time of Trump, it is documented. It is documented. We have more white supremacist terrorism, but our media is not using the term. Right now, there's a trial going on in Kansas. As we sit here in federal court, 3 self-professed white supremacists plotting to kill Muslim immigrants in Kansas. They were called terrorists by the U.S. attorney there, thankfully. But the media is barely covering this. And if they were 3 Muslim guys, I have no doubt it would be covered much more. And again, that makes us less safe as a nation.
Well, and if they were legally identified as terrorists, there are tools that the government can use to basically take them down that they don't use now. Or am I missing something?
Absolutely, because there's more of a commitment of resources then. They'll treat it like the FBI will be more involved in infiltrating these organizations, which they should be. Now, in the case in Kansas, there was an FBI undercover agent involved. But who knows what else is going on out there? We need more in the time of Trump to keep us safe from domestic, international terrorists, those who might be inspired by ISIS, to those inspired by a new confederacy emerging and a white supremacist vision of this nation. It makes us less safe not to contribute those resources and put them for where they
well said. My colleague, Dean Obeidallah, deanofradio.com is his website. You can tweet him at Dean Obeidallah.